Welcome to this explainer. Now, universal basic income is one of those topics that generates a massive amount of noise and debate right now. But today, we're stripping all of that away. We are going to look squarely at the raw data, the historical context, and the hard economic facts to figure out exactly how this concept actually functions in the real world, and what it might mean for the future of work. With all the recent headlines about automation and artificial intelligence taking over jobs, it's incredibly easy to assume that giving people unconditional cash is just some knee-jerk 21st century invention. But is it actually a new idea? Well, as we dig into the sources, the true story goes much deeper than modern Silicon Valley, stretching back into eras you probably wouldn't expect. Here is exactly how we're breaking things down today. First, the deep roots of UBI. Second, real-world results out of Finland. Third, will UBI cause inflation? And finally, funding the AI future. Okay, let's jump straight into part one, the deep roots of UBI. Believe it or not, the push for an unconditional cash income actually dates way back to the 1790s with figures like Thomas Paine and Thomas Spence. And since then, the idea has experienced three massive historical waves of growing support. In the 1960s, it actually found champions across the entire political spectrum, literally everyone from civil rights leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. to conservative economists like Milton Friedman. We're currently in the third wave, which really started taking off globally after the Great Recession in the 2010s. It's just fascinating that this is a conversation hundreds of years in the making. And here is something absolutely wild. It's crazy to realize just how close the United States actually came to establishing a national guaranteed income under the Nixon administration. Back in 1971, a guaranteed income bill had already overwhelmingly passed the House of Representatives. It ultimately missed passing the Senate by just 10 votes. 10. It really makes you wonder how completely different our social safety net and honestly our broader economy might look today if those 10 votes had gone the other way. Moving right along to Section 2, real-world results in Finland. So let's move from historical theory to a modern nation's reality. What happens when we actually try it? Well, Finland ran a massive 2-year experiment from 2017 to 2018. Reviewed by the European Commission, this nationwide random sampling took 2,000 unemployed people and gave them a basic income. Now, the government's primary goal wasn't just to hand out free money. They wanted to study if a basic income would change labor market participation, and if it could cut through the heavy, incredibly stressful bureaucracy of traditional Social Security. This setup gave researchers a perfectly clean, scientific comparison to see if unconditional money actually stops people from wanting to work. The treatment group received 560 euros every single month, absolutely no strings attached. If they got a job or started a business, they kept the money. Meanwhile, the control group stayed on traditional benefits, which are conditional and often get taken away if you find work. Because these groups started out socio-demographically identical, it's pretty much a perfect test environment. When the experiment concluded, the results were pretty staggering. The employment days were virtually identical. The UBI group worked an average of 49.6 days, and the control group worked 49.3 days. So the unconditional money did not disincentivize work. But the real shift, that happened in human well-being. The UBI group reported significantly higher life satisfaction, a 7.3 out of 10 compared to a 6.8. They reported drastically lower mental and economic stress, and even felt a much stronger sense of trust in their society. You know, it's a fascinating look at how strictly neutral data gets interpreted in these broader, highly debated topics. Opponents of UBI take these exact same numbers and argue the program was a failure because employment didn't drastically increase. On the flip side, proponents take that exact same data and argue it was a massive success, proving you can significantly boost human happiness and mental health without tanking the labor supply. It perfectly captures the philosophical divide at the heart of this policy. All right, time to tackle the elephant in the room with Section 3. Will UBI cause inflation? If you're wondering what this all means for your grocery bill, researcher Scott Settons explains that UBI's inflationary impact isn't a simple cause and effect. It's actually a highly complex multivariate equation based on at least 17 different economic factors. Basically, this means the outcome depends on a vast web of interacting variables. Things like the size of the UBI, the nation's tax structure, and the economy's spare capacity, which just means how much room businesses have to produce more goods before they're forced to raise prices. All of these completely alter the math. Now, surprisingly, handing out money triggers several deflationary forces. For instance, individuals often use their UBI to aggressively pay down credit cards. When debt is paid off, that money is effectively deleted from circulation, which shrinks the money supply. Furthermore, people with a stable income stop buying cheap, inferior goods that break every year. They stop buying 5 pairs of cheap shoes and instead buy one high-quality pair of boots that lasts a decade. Even the increase in people staying home to do unpaid care work actually lowers overall market costs. However, the risk of temporary inflation is very real in a few specific scenarios. If monopolies collude to artificially raise prices, or if an economy is already redlining way over its maximum capacity, flooding it with cash will for sure cause spikes. But the absolute biggest threat? Housing. If restrictive zoning laws prevent new homes from being built, landlords can simply swallow up everyone's UBI in rent increases. Economists argue we desperately need YIMBY policies, yes, in my backyard, to build enough housing to absorb that new demand. Which brings us to our final chapter, Section 4, Funding the AI Future. So how do we actually pay for all of this? Well, economic modeling shows a massive sliding scale depending on how generous a society wants to be. Funding a budget-neutral UBI might only require a tiny 1.5% consumption tax bump, which is hardly noticeable at the register. But a robust $1,000 monthly payout, that requires a steep 19.3% tax increase on consumption. To put that into perspective, a $100 purchase suddenly costs nearly $120. So there is a very real trade-off between the size of the benefit and the tax burden, though researchers do note both models ultimately reduce inequality compared to our current system. To avoid burdening everyday consumers at the cash register, economists propose a few alternative funding mechanisms. One is a land value tax. Because nobody can create more land, taxing the land itself, rather than the property built on it, is considered incredibly efficient. Another option is shifting income taxes toward the top 10% of earners, who currently consume a whopping 50% of all goods and services in the U.S. But for the digital age, a brand new mechanism is entering the conversation. Conceptualized by Bill Gates long before the current AI boom, the robot tax suggests that as artificial intelligence displaces human labor, the automated systems themselves must be taxed to fund society. It's a truly fascinating concept, creating a direct financial link between automation and social support. It essentially ensures that the massive efficiency and wealth generated by artificial intelligence doesn't just concentrate in the hands of a few tech companies, but rather supports the actual human workforce it replaced. So as the AI age rapidly approaches and the very nature of work transforms before our eyes, it brings up a vital question for all of our careers and lives. How will we design a new social contract to ensure this technological progress actually benefits everyone? Will we continue to rely on traditional conditional welfare, or will a universal basic income become the new foundation of our economy? Well, the data and the history are in your hands now. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep exploring the incredible world around us.